I have been called a grandma of social media. With my background in marketing and advertising, I remember when social media came on the scene. In fact, none of my college education had anything to do with social media, yet it has been an important part of my business over the last 2 decades. I've always wondered about the effects of social media on happiness and resilience. And so one of the things that I studied as part of our research was, how do people see social media as it affects them both personally and professionally? 88% of working Americans believe that you can get addicted to social media. I know that I have had times in my life where I have been addicted to social media. While only 50% of respondents believe that being on social media makes them less happy, 63% of respondents believe that social media is intentionally trying to create a negative emotional response from users. This is really fascinating to me. If social media is intentionally trying to create a negative or emotional response from users, maybe because we want to learn more, we want to scroll more, we spend more time, what can we do to make sure that we stay emotionally intelligent while social media is a key part of our lives? I noticed recently that I was spending 8 hours a day on my screen time. Now, I also own a business, do a lot of work on my phone, and use my phone for everything from learning, reading, listening, communicating, and everything in between. That said, I decided that I would go on a 1-month journey to figure out how to decrease my screen time and what activities I could do that would actually increase my connection with others and help me to have additional experiences. My goal was to decrease my screen time by 3 hours. I don't know, for some reason, I just felt like if I could go from 8 to 5, that would be winning. And so I decided to do some intentional things. If you've been around the podcast for a long time, I live and breathe by my daily, weekly, and monthly list. I tried to create a series of habits that would help me to create more intentional time away from my phone, and I did it in daily, weekly, monthly portions. I also just said to myself, hey, Michelle, if you can do some of these things, I think it would help. What I also tracked is each day, I just noted whether or not I felt a little bit happier, whether I felt more connected to others, or whether I just felt more confident. One of the things that I've noticed is that social media increases my need to compare myself to others. And when I say need, I just mean that it's an innate part of me where I feel like when I'm on social media, I am constantly scrolling through, well, how come they get to go on that trip? Or why isn't this happening in my business? Or how can this happen? And I think that's a natural response because we spend so much time with each other. It's really easy to look around and to compare ourselves. If you don't have that challenge, I am so happy for you. But my negative news ticker is running regularly, especially when I am looking at social media. Now, I think social media is a great tool. I use it in my business. I have many clients that use it in their businesses that we support and help them with. But I also feel like even just having a reliance upon our phones for all of the things that we do, we know that it can decrease our brain power. It can decrease our ability to understand and self-regulate our emotions. And it can also decrease our ability to understand what is true and what is digital. So in my own personal quest, I want to share with you a few things that I decided I was going to do intentionally for 1 month and see how I felt about my social media use and my screen time. The first thing that I did was I got a physical book. I checked it out from the library and I even bought a couple online. But I took a physical book with me everywhere. That was one of my new daily habits, was that I would keep a book with me in my car. Now, it was one more thing that I had to make sure I grabbed, but I spend the time to make sure I grab my phone. So I just took the extra 60 seconds to make sure that I had a book. That meant that when I was sitting in carpool lanes, I was more likely to read than to scroll, and I was more likely to focus on the things that were around me. I also became very aware of how much time I spend waiting at the doctor's office, waiting for a client to be at a meeting, waiting for an event to start. And it was so much better for me to just have a book. I also found that when I had a book, I spent less time watching movies on airplanes, which is an interesting byproduct. I love movies. If I could make money just by watching and critiquing movies, Just like our old friends that gave us 2 thumbs up back in the 80s, I would give up all of this and just watch movies for the rest of my life. But I found that when I had a book, it was really good for me to also have my nose in a book. So number 1 was I took a book with me everywhere. As a result, I am reading 5 or 6 books a month, in addition to the ones that I still listen to on Audible when I'm taking long trips or I'm on the road for a long time. And it's been really good for me to get through not just nonfiction, but fiction books as well. I remember in 2020, I needed a brain break. I am a nonfiction girl. I read lots of nonfiction books. I always have a few going. There's a couple on my bedside table. There's one in my bathroom. There's one on my desk. There's also many in my Audible. And sometimes I'm halfway between a few. But I started reading fiction books in 2020, and it's been one of the best things. One of the things that I noted in my month long is that when I was reading fiction books, I felt less stressed. When I'm reading nonfiction books, I'm constantly wondering, how can I improve here? What can I do there? Thinking about ways to improve my business, ways to improve my personal life, ways to improve my parenting. And while all of that is good, I found that I needed just a story, a way to escape, relax. And I didn't give myself that kind of self-care. And so now always having a fiction book with me is really helping me decrease my stress and decrease my screen time. Number 2, I made a commitment to spend more time in nature. When I tried to figure out what that looked like from daily, weekly, and monthly, I made a commitment to do more of my exercise outside, even if it was just walking, and also 1 time a week intentionally doing something else, whether that was going on a hike, going up in the canyon and experiencing other pieces of nature around me, but finding something intentionally to do where I could experience more creation and also just take myself away from the regular mundane of my home and office. Sometimes it's really tempting when I'm bored to just pick up a phone and scroll or look at what's happening on social media. But when I was in other places, it was really easy for me to take in what was happening around me. So being intentional about spending time in nature and doing some of my exercise outside also helped me decrease my stress, decrease my competition, and increase my confidence. The next one that I did was I started to be more mindful of the time I spent exercising and moving. Exercising is not my favorite thing, but a long time ago, I made a daily habit of moving my body for 30 minutes a day and hitting 10,000 steps, regardless of anything else. Sometimes I get more of an exercise in, sometimes I'm able to do an intentional workout, but it's a minimum of 30 minutes a day and my 10,000 steps. Now, there are some days where I don't hit that because of whatever's happening with events or work or travel, and sometimes that's tricky. But that is my daily goal. And so I just got intentional about how I did it, because sometimes my idea of exercising is turning on a movie while I exercise, or my idea of exercising is listening to a podcast. And so I started getting mindful of not just the time I spent exercising, but what I did with the time when I did it. Now, it's really hard for me to read books while I exercise, but it gave me opportunities to explore different ways to pass the time, whether that was listening to music, putting something else in, but something completely disconnected from my phone. And this was one thing that really decreased my screen time. And it was helpful for me to find other ways to pass the time and other ways to connect. One of the things that I did was I reached out to others to make exercise time a little bit more social, and it increased my connection as well. I invited neighbors to go for hikes or walks. I invited my husband and my kids to go with me outside. And so I found ways to make the movement and exercise that I was already doing to be more of a connection activity. And sometimes it didn't work and I needed to watch a movie or listen to a podcast. But I tried to be more intentional about making sometimes each week times where I am both connecting and exercising. Along with that, spend more time with the people that you care about. The research showed that spending time with people that they cared about, whether that was family or friends, not only increased happiness, but increased people's sense of purpose in their lives. And so while this was my own personal experience, the research actually backs this up. The ways that people connect increases their happiness and decreases the time that they spend in virtual or digital means. And so how can you be intentional about spending more time with the people that you care about? Now, I did share with you that this was my plan to decrease my screen time. But ultimately, my goal is always to increase my happiness. And what I found is at the end of that month, I was so much happier. And not because I wasn't spending time on my phone, but because of the other things I was doing instead. Because of the time I was spending with people, because of the stories and the experiences that I was having in books, because of the ways that I was able to enjoy and appreciate nature. All of those other things gave my life a sense of fulfillment that can never be filled with a phone. Now, I am a phone person, and I'm not the kind of person that went from 8 to 0. I was the kind who said, hey, I bet there's 3 hours of time here when I was looking at my statistics that I could actually do a little bit differently. I shifted to moving some of my religious study to physical books again, instead of just being on my phone. And having that physical, tangible connection was also really good for me. I am not suggesting you change anything. I'm just inviting you to consider what habits or actions will help you increase your happiness. And maybe your online time and or your social media time could be adjusted so that you will be able to find different ways to feel that sense of fulfillment and that connection with others. We know that lots of research, not just my study, has shown that the time that we spend with others is incredibly valuable. And the times that we connect with people are important. We've talked about this podcast, how we can work with remote environments when people aren't connecting as frequently, but also know that it's important for us to figure out, where do we find connection and who are we spending time with? As an adult, one of the things I hear from women most frequently is that they have a really hard time finding connective relationships in their older years. And it's hard for me too. My relationships have changed and grown over the years. Some of them are based off of proximity, the people who live close to me. Some are based off of common interests and activities, and many are based on my work relationships. Many of my best friends are people that I see very infrequently at live events or because of the ways that our industries intersect. Whatever it is, if nothing else, I encourage you to find ways to swap out time you spend on your phone in personal connection, whether that's exercise and movement or just in socializing. But I'd love for you to do a study of your own, whether it's decreasing screen time or just choosing to increase connection. What are the activities that you can do daily, weekly, and monthly that will improve your own mental wellness, help you be more emotionally intelligent, and help you feel more happy and resilient? The study was clear that when you're happier and resilient, not only do you feel a greater sense of purpose, but you're better able to handle things at home and at work as well. So anything that you do to intentionally improve your happiness and resilience will help you feel more fulfilled. There's some additional resources available for you in the show notes. You can also find more of this research at speakmichelle.com/research. All of the videos that we have done since April of 2024 are based and rooted in this research that will help you understand how you can look at your emotional wellness both personally and professionally. Until then, we will see you